have Laurie Gifford. He's the co-founder of PD Avengers, a global coalition working towards ending Parkinson's disease. He is the host of When Life Gives You Parkinson's podcast and the Parkinson's podcast for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. Larry is an ambassador for the World Parkinson's Congress 2023 and serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Parkinson's Disease. He is dedicated to raising awareness, advocating for research, and sharing his personal journey with Parkinson's disease. Larry, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here today.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for hosting us today. We really appreciate it. It's great to see everybody turning out today on Monday. It makes Monday bright and great. I'm really excited to be here. It's a real treat for me and for all of us because we have the one, the only, the great one, Dr. Laurie Mischley with us today. Laurie has carved out a really important focus for people living with PD. It's where she explores nutrition and neuroscience. She's a teacher, a researcher, a clinician, and her annual week-long PD summer school is coming up in August. Details are on her website, educationismedicine.com. Laurie, welcome to the special PD Avengers podcast.
Thank you for the invitation to be here.
So you're here today initially to talk about the new app, the Pro PD app. This is revolutionary. It's a tool designed to measure the burden of Parkinson's disease, provide patients with valuable insights into their conditions. How did this come about?
Well, in 2010, I got a government grant to leave my nutrition neurology practice and go become learned in clinical trials. My assignment was to find better ways to study Parkinson's disease, because the problem that we have is this disease is so diverse. Some people are in a wheelchair in a couple of years, other people are water skiing 20 years after diagnosis, and it makes it really difficult to study things like diet and exercise and a good night's sleep, which we seem to think is relevant, but we can't figure out how to give you a placebo meditation or a placebo carrot and broccoli, right? We can't placebo motivate you to exercise, but yet the motivation that comes with exercise seems to be part of the medicine. So we don't know how to study these things using these approach that we're currently taking. So my assignment was to find better ways to study lifestyle modification. So when I came over to the field, I started looking around trying to figure out what was the scale people were using. And I realized I didn't have a scale that could be administered remotely. The scales that we had are not relevant or sensitive early in the disease. By the time a person gets Parkinson's, they've already had it for a decade or two. These symptoms that we define Parkinson's by are late stage downstream consequences to a syndrome that started years ago. And so when I attempted to find ways to study lifestyle modification in Parkinson's, what I realized was we were looking under the wrong lamppost. All of these scales that are focused on tremor and rigidity and slowness, while relevant to people late in the disease struggling with motor stuff, are only relevant to people struggling with motor stuff late in the disease. We don't have a scale that works really, really well for people in the prodromal stages in those first 10 years following diagnosis when they're not that motor symptomatic. So I built one.
So for the record, I do think I could be the guinea pig for exercise that is not real exercise. I think I've figured that one out. But so now that you've created this app, what is your goal?
Right. So my goal is to create a global currency by which we can start to communicate about Parkinson's disease severity and symptom management. It is insane to me that we are 200 years into Parkinson's disease. And the current state of the science is to tell you at diagnosis, this is irreversible, progressive, and it only gets worse and we have no way to track and monitor it. We're just going to watch you accumulate symptoms along the way and try and hide them as they pop up.
So it's whack-a-mole.
Right, that is exactly what the state of the science is. Like at no point does your doctor say, hey, let's try and get your whatever 20 points better by the next visit. I mean, there is no goal setting, there is no strategy, there is no offensive approach. It's purely defensive. So my strategy
reactive versus proactive. Yeah,
yep,
for sure.
So the goal is to create a universal currency. It might not be perfect, but at least we can all get on the same page. So we have a tool to talk about how our own symptoms are changing over time, getting better, getting worse. We can communicate with our providers. We can set goals, keep tabs, compare ourselves to other people, and alert ourselves to changes. So currency, creating a currency.
Now, how has the app been tested and validated for reliability?
So over 40,000 people from 134 countries have used it. It has been validated in English. That manuscript is under review. It has been validated in Swedish. That manuscript is in press. The app is only available in English, but as of this week, we're starting in on a Spanish version, but we have now tested it in multiple languages for sensitivity and specificity and test-retest reliability and accuracy and change over time. We know that it correlates with other measures of disease progression. We know that when you start Cinemet, it improves. So we can see on average how many points change the average person has over time.
What are you finding out?
That rich white people in the United States do better than poor people of more diverse backgrounds around the United States. It has been eye-opening for me. We currently have people registered for this app from 134 different countries. It is mind-blowing to see the diversity that is happening around the world. Nobody has ever really looked country to country. Is Canada doing better than the United States? Are there different places around the US that are doing better than the other? Are there places throughout Africa that are getting better care than others? And so that wasn't an intention of mine when I designed this app, but I hadn't really appreciated how rapidly this app would be globally adopted by how desperate people are around the world for some tool for taking control. And so now that these data are starting to come in, we can see, I can see on the back end some differences geographically, but in the research that I've been doing for the last 10 years, we see people who exercise more, who eat more vegetables, who have more friends, who make more money, who take a handful of supplements, do better over time.
So where do you get the app now? It's just right in your app store?
Yep. It's freely available on iOS and Android. You have to search Parkinson's symptom tracking. ProPD comes up on some people's, not others. So we logged it under Parkinson's symptom tracking, but it's free. I'll tell you right now, one of the biggest hurdles that I had not anticipated was computer literacy among people with Parkinson's disease. I was a little naive about how unfamiliar some people are with downloading apps and going over to their email to verify, this is a HIPAA compliant app. You can email a copy to your physician. I think everybody should, before each clinic visit, generate a ProPD report that you email or bring with you to your clinic visit. That is really important here. But yes, freely available.
So you told us one of the hurdles, but what are some of the maybe user-friendly aspects of the experience?
Well, I think it gives people their bearings. It is truly a tool for taking control. I can't figure out how you can get to where you want to go if you don't know where you're starting from. I think every single one of us needs a report card, even if you don't like what the report card says, even if it says you have a D-. I'm telling you that's really, really valuable information. If you don't get the sting of learning, oh, geez, I have a D-, right? Like that's what should motivate you to go to your doctor and say, hey, what's up? Are we missing something? Could there be an underlying something else? Can we test my thyroid, my B12? Can we just make sure I'm not missing something here? So I think having a point of comparison to other people diagnosed the same time as you is incredibly valuable. Being able to chart your own fluctuations. I've been doing mine every week. I don't have Parkinson's disease and I bounce around about 30 points a week, up or down, right? And so life happens. You're going to be in more pain, more anxiety, more sleep, whether or not you have Parkinson's disease. But I think it's really valuable for people to realize over a given month or a year, how much do my symptoms bounce around? I think every one of you should have your head out of the sand in terms of what has my rate of progression been to date? Am I accumulating symptoms faster than the average person or more slowly than the average person? Because I would like to believe that if the answer is I am doing better than average, I am progressing more slowly and I'm less symptomatic, that will motivate you to keep going with those vegetables and the exercise and those early bedtimes. If you are doing worse than average, I'm hoping that motivates you to realize I need to step it up and do a little something different, whether that is with my physician or with myself. I'm trying to teach people that there really is some control that you have over how this disease plays itself out.
Now, you've mentioned grade letters, you've mentioned points. What are you measuring, and how are you defining how somebody is on a scale?
Great. So what this is we made up a list of 35 very common symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And we ask, on average, over the last 7 days, how much of a problem have any of these symptoms been? If you don't have the symptom, you feel like $1 million, you have no anxiety, you slide the tab all the way to the left. If you have horrible, debilitating anxiety that has completely interfered with your life, you slide the tab all the way to the right. And so for 35 symptoms, you very quickly go through and just size up this past week, how much of a problem have any of these symptoms been? On the back end, the computer labels these all 0 to 100 and adds them up. So by the time you answer these quick slider bar questions, you can now get a cumulative score, which should be somewhere between 0 and 3,500. Really, nobody's ever higher than 2,500 is about where it maxes out. So 0 to 2,500 is about the scale that we see people reporting. The average person at diagnosis is about a 550 and gains somewhere between 50 and 70 points a year, depending on where you live.
Okay, so I'm going to just take a minute here, take a breath. There's a lot of information coming out of everybody here. There is a YouTube video that Laurie has done. It's about an hour long, and she has graphs and charts, so you can look at that as well. If anybody has any questions, just put them in the chat, and please do that at any time. We really appreciate all your contributions here today. Let's take a couple from the audience right now. How is this different from the MDS UPDRS?
Because in the MDS UPDRS, first of all, requires a physician evaluation. So you need a clinic visit and you need to come in. Most people early in the disease, the MDS UPDRS is not very useful. They score very low. And the difference between a 5 and a 10 doesn't actually have much what we call clinically relevant. It's not clinically relevant. Whether your score is a 5 or a 10 doesn't actually mean much by way of your quality of life. And the way the scale is designed, the change from a 5 to a 10 is not the same as a 30 to a 35. And so we treat it like it's continuous, but it's not continuous. And so the point is, there is nobody in this audience who has been diagnosed in the last 10 years who has been working strategically with their neurologist to get their UPDRS, their MDS UPDRS score down, right? While that outcome measure can be useful in large-scale clinical trials, it has not been useful yet in a disease modification trial. But while it can be useful in some studies, it tends to not be useful in clinic. This is a measure that is useful to patients and providers in clinic, as well as researchers.
And I'll just say that the UPDRS is mainly subjective from the doctor's point of view, and this becomes more subjective from the patient's point of view. And I think that has a lot of value.
The other thing to keep in mind is the UPDRS is a 15-minute snapshot of what is a highly fluctuating disease. And so most of you would say that exam that your doctor does not reflect your experience with Parkinson's. Whereas what I have done is by asking you, and this was very intentional, by asking you, how much has this symptom been a problem in the last week? What I have done is I've gotten rid of all of the ups and downs, and I've asked you to just give me an about 40%, about a 10. But even your guessing is way more accurate than that 15-minute snapshot. So
I guess that's how you account for the variations throughout each day of the symptoms.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Eyes above them.
So, yeah, and it's hard for me to remember, so I'd probably make notes throughout the day, and then at the end of the week, you'd have those notes available, because it's hard for me to remember what I had for dinner last night sometimes, so. It says, why is Q10 shown in the making symptoms worse category?
It isn't. There have been, we just published a paper on the use of nutraceuticals in Parkinson's disease, and coenzyme Q10 was statistically significantly associated with better outcomes over time.
Okay, great. How sensitive is the scale?
Great question. So the scale honestly seems to be more sensitive than you. The average person needs a 86 to 87 point change to be able to notice that they're getting better or worse. But in our cohort, the scale change, the average person's score increases at about 40 points a year. And so we can see a change per year that is less detectable than what you notice. And so people have this sense that it's really willy-nilly, it's very subjective, but it's actually shockingly, you are surprisingly good at telling us how you feel. You are surprisingly good at knowing how severe this disease is. And you are surprisingly good at telling us how constipated you've been this week. Like, it's not, we're treating it like it's revolutionary, but I'm embarrassed to say it's taken us 200 years to realize that you are useful in helping us assess disease severity. How are you? You wouldn't think that it has taken us as long as it has to ask the patient, how are you?
Yes. So what is the policy regarding protecting my information? You know, is there a security and privacy policy that I should be aware of?
Yep, it's all HIPAA compliant, two-step verification. We don't share your data with anybody. We don't sell it to anybody. I'm not making money off of it. It is brought to you by the generous donations of a couple community members, both in terms of time and money, Chris Adamson, Don Johnson, myself. But
Great. Has anybody showed continued improvement over multiple years using diet and exercise?
lots of people, 7% of people in United States and Canada are actually showing lack of improvement, lack of worsening or improvement over the last 6 years. And we are finding pockets of providers and clinics who are getting even better outcomes than that. So yes, I'm very excited to report that every year my conviction grows stronger that Parkinson's does not need to be considered progressive and irreversible.
I think it's important to understand how the ProPD app enables longitudinal tracking and monitoring PD symptoms and PD diagnoses that may change to PD+. How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, so on the registration form, when you register, not only do we make this available for people with idiopathic Parkinson's disease, but we also have a place at registration where we ask if you have any of the other Parkinson's plus or other Parkinsonian disorders. And we ask if you are not a diagnosed person. I have teenagers who have already registered and gotten their score. And I'm telling you, if at 40 or 50 or 60 they get diagnosed, it's going to be really valuable, even if once every year or two they take a score to see at what point did this actually start to change. So I think it's useful prodromally and early on. So the app, what it does is it's storing your scores, and it allows you, one, with the push of a button, to generate a report that you can look at today or share with your trainer or physician and see which symptoms are your in which domains are your symptoms in? Are they mostly motor or autonomic? Are they mostly mood or cognitive? How you compare to other people, where your symptoms and how your symptoms have been changing over time. And then it lists of the 35 symptoms, it lists in order which ones are most severe with a quantitative number attached to them. So it allows you to generate that report in PDF form. And then for the nerds on here who may like to play with data a little bit more, you can actually download your data as a CSV file and do what you want with it. Share it with researchers, draw plots, graphs, charts.
So are you making the double de-identified data available to researchers?
I would love to. I don't see why I wouldn't. Once it's de-identified, I think it has the potential to change the way we understand Parkinson's globally, and I can't do it alone.
And just to go back 2 questions ago, if somebody is misdiagnosed as Parkinson's and re-diagnosed, does that change where, like, the scale? Like, so let's say they had really high scores for something, but then does that go back and recalculate where I stand personally? Like,
Yeah, so if
somebody who is with PD?
So if at year 8, the person is told, oh, this looks like MSA, you can go back into your settings and change your diagnosis to MSA. And then what we could do, or any researcher could do, is look at, here is person number 1742 who had reported PD for the first 8 years and then changed it to MSA. And then they would have the option of recoding the prior ones or throwing them out.
Great. What is the current plan of integrating healthcare providers?
What do you mean?
Well, so is this something that you are actively or reaching out to the patient community, but is there a way that they, like my doctor, could go into the back end of the app and pull my data?
Yeah, I would love that. We can have that. We're waiting for the demand. I start every clinic day by logging on, seeing who's on my schedule. I pull everybody's reports. I already know by the time the day starts who I'm most worried about, what Betty's primary concerns are, what my goals are with Jeff and Joyce. I mean, it's incredibly valuable for me as a provider to prepare for taking care of my patients.
Does the app track what medication you take and how much and how often you take levodopa?
Nope.
This is not about medication.
There is a second version of the app in the works that will actually hopefully change behavior. If we can ask you a couple questions about how much activity you did today, how much time you spent with friends, how many servings of broccoli and Brussels sprouts you ate, we are actually sitting on the data that will predict, you keep up behavior like this, and here's what your 10-year trajectory is slated to look like.
Wow.
Right. And so I am really excited about having another version of the app that helps you all get a better handle on how your actions today influence change over time.
Shabir wants to know if there's any data on B1 or high dose thiamine.
Yeah. So again, we just published a paper on the use of nutraceuticals in Parkinson's disease, and high dose thiamine was associated with better outcomes over time, but it missed statistical significance by a hair. So jury's still out.
Okay. You had mentioned that 7% of the people who exercise and eat right are showing the symptoms either stopping or slowing. Does their amount of levodopa that they take decrease? Do you know?
Oh, good question. I don't know, but I wouldn't necessarily expect it to, or at least let me say it this way. I would not consider that a measure of success. Whether or not, even if your symptoms are getting better and better and better over a 10-year period, and you say my quality of life is continually higher, and my symptoms are getting lower and lower and lower each year, I don't know that a reduction in meds is required for me to call that successful.
Okay. What is what is success for this app? Like when you look at when you created this, like what do you see as like, oh, yeah, okay, now it's real?
Two answers. One is for the patient. One is from the research. Three answers. Research. Success for a patient is keeping your score as low as possible for as long as possible. Right now, around 1,000. Once your score goes above 1,000, your quality of life goes from good to fair. And so for most, the average person with Parkinson's reaches that point around year 10. My goal is that patients with Parkinson's make it to 100 years old with their score under 1,000. I want to change the way we look at Parkinson's, and the name of the game is you spend all of your days between now and your 100th birthday with your quality of life somewhere in the excellent or the good zone with a score under 1,000. So that's my goal for patients. My goal for clinicians is that we can get our bearings, we can start to set goals with patients, we can identify the people who are doing unusually well and learn from them. And then for researchers, I truly am hoping for a scale that is sensitive enough to detect improvement in disease modification trials. There have been over 20 some disease modification trials that have been done in Parkinson's disease, where we have a intervention that works in petri dishes and test tubes. It works in rats and monkeys. We bring it over to humans. We use this outcome measure to measure severity, and it fails. So either we are really bad at predicting at which drugs should be studied, or we're using an outcome measure that is making the positive results fall through the cracks. And so whether we're talking about broccoli or exercise or a new pharmaceutical drug or a new brain surgery, it doesn't matter what the intervention is. I would love a scale that researchers can use that is more sensitive early in the disease than what we have been using up until now. And philosophically, I'm going to keep going. Philosophically, we have spent the last 200 years defining this disease by what the provider can see. I mean, it is time to redefine this disease by what you experience. When we ask a neurologist to define Parkinson's, tremor, rigidity, hunched posture, bradykinesia. When we ask patients to describe Parkinson's, it's fatigue and sleep problems and ED and apathy and anxiety and can't get the words out and brain fog. I mean, we aren't even talking apples and oranges. We have to take control. We, the patients, I'm on your team here. We have to take control and start insisting that the scale that providers are the needle they're trying to move is one that is actually relevant to your quality of life. And the PRO-PD is the only scale that I know of that has been correlated to quality of life early in disease.
I love it. I love the idea of it. I love the patient forwardness of it. I mean, it's very PD Avengers that way, where it's a patient-led discussion with your doctor. How am I feeling? What's giving me the most issues? Because that's important. That's what doctors want to know, because they're playing whack-a-mole and they want to hit the biggest thing they can hit. And by tracking your symptoms, you can do that. Do you find people are consistent with their entries, or do you set reminders on the app to fill out the form, or?
Yeah, so regarding the consistency, while there are some exceptions to the rule, most people are consistent within themselves. So your definition of severe constipation may be different than my definition of severe constipation, but Pollyanna type people are always Pollyanna type people, and Eeyore people are always Eeyore type people, right? So a consistently crabby, everything's horrible person always answers that way. So even though it might not be so accurate to compare your score to my score, it's very consistent to compare you to you over time. So the test retest reliability is strong. In terms of frequency of intakes, when you register, it asks, can we send you reminders? Most people hit no because we think we're going to solicit you. Hit yes, hit yes. The only thing we are going to send you is your reminder to fill it out. And the next question is, do you want to be reminded monthly, weekly, or quarterly. We default it to monthly. If you just leave it where it is, we'll send you a ding once a month that says, hey, time to fill it out. For those of you who are about to go vegan or switch your medications or go from 3 pills a day to 4 pills a day, you might want to do it weekly for a couple weeks to see if you can detect improvement. Are you seeing improvement? Like, set it for weekly there. If things are stable, you barely even pay attention to Parkinson's, set it to quarterly.
If I'm changing my medication and changing my diet and doing the exercise, how do I know which is working?
If you have 6 holes in the bottom of the boat and you plug all of them, how do you know which one was responsible for stopping the boat from sinking?
Right. But you're not tracking the medicine, you're only tracking the other thing. So I'm wondering if there is, if we go, like for instance, Shabir had DBS surgery, and he said, my tremors went away, but I had new symptoms come on. And then how is that factored into the fact that he's also eating a lot more leafy green vegetables and his tremor went away?
Well, so that's what we do with the MVP study, and that's the power in numbers. So 2 parts. So for you using the app, if you can go home from the doctor's office today and there's a notes section, and you can say, about to go from 3 levodopa a day to 4 pills a day. And you can get your score today, taken again in a week, and for the rest of your life, we'll have that record. Oh, look, there was a 30% improvement in my score that week when I went from 3 to 4 a day. Right, that just becomes part of your record in that context there. In terms of the more complicated question, how do you know what's what? This is what each one of you is going to have to decide. I'm going to just eat my vegetables this week and not exercise and see what happens, right? If you want to play that game with yourself, I'm going to exercise but not eat vegetables. You can do all of the home experimentation you want. What I encourage you to do is, what happens if I make friends, exercise, and eat my vegetables? How low can I get my score? Right? But this is but right now you guys can't even play that game unless you're keeping score.
Yeah, like a lot of us have trouble with limbo, doing the limbo. And that's how low can you go? How do you find results from past survey participation?
So anybody who downloads and registers for the app will be asked a question. Have you ever completed a Pro-PD questionnaire before? And if so, do you want Laurie to move your old scores over to the app? And then we file that with the ethics board, with the other studies, and then we can move your scores over.
Okay. What are the, from your study, because I know in 2017 you had the big study about the nutrition and your dietary. I always like talking about this too. What, like right now, what are like the top 5 things I should be looking for at the grocery store to help me?
No question about it. Fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, nuts and seeds, olive oil, coconut oil, and non-fried fish, fresh herbs and spices.
How does fish reduce PD severity?
Well, we don't know is the short answer. There are probably about 20 genetic and anti-inflammatory based mechanisms of action. Fish oil is very anti-inflammatory, and the omega-3 fatty acids have been shown to protect against dementia and depression. So long story short, DHA, which are the long chain fatty acid molecules found in cold water oily fish, are really useful for brain health.
I find there's a lot of things that we know that help PD, but we don't know why, like exercise, like there's like what the mitochondria are doing. Like there's so many things that we're like, yeah, it does this and this, and the gut bacteria, the gut bacteria, and like it's just like it's an unsolvable puzzle. It almost feels like. And so if you were to say diet and exercise is part of the big picture, and nutrition and neuro, like is that like a quarter? Is that a half? Is that most of it, and then there's drugs on top of that? Like, how much of the puzzle are you putting together?
So this might not come out as articulately as I'd like it to, but
My question wasn't very articulate either. So.
well, I'm going to argue that everything drug-based that we do is based on supplementing an amino acid called L-DOPA, right? So really the entire pharmaceutical world is an offshoot of a nutritional deficiency disorder. Just the way some people can't produce enough cholesterol, some people can't produce enough CoQ10, some people can't produce enough insulin, some people can't produce enough dopamine. You all, for some reason, can't produce enough dopamine. You have a conditionally essential nutritional deficiency, and you have to augment L-DOPA from outside the world. And as long as you supplement this amino acid, the machinery runs pretty well. And over the last 30 to 50 years, we've gotten very good at packaging and delivering this amino acid supplement in a lot of fancy versions. But even though they come with a high price tag and you fill them at the pharmacy and your physician prescribes them, we're kind of deluding ourselves to think that all of that is anything other than a nutritional supplement. We are just giving you L-DOPA so things can work as normal. So I would actually argue the only success Parkinson's has ever had has been realizing that when you supplement things that the body needs that you're not making enough of, you do way, way, way better. I'm on a search to find out, are there other things like L-DOPA that if we give you a little bit more, other things start working better too?
Yeah, well, like I just did a recent podcast on light therapy and how that actually re-energizes the mitochondria. And just like for when you have use lights when the seasons change, seasonal affective disorder. They can do the same with the vagus nerve and the gut and the brain, and they're seeing some great survey results. So I think there's a lot of cool things out there. What do you anticipate your next phase of this app will have that doesn't have now that people should be excited about?
So I think on the back end, the things that I am most looking forward to is getting providers, the more of you who show up at your doctor's office with these reports. I've been using this report myself in clinic since 2013, and I am 10,000 times a better doctor today because of it. I learn from my patients. I practice better care. Symptoms don't fall through the cracks. I am accountable. I have to address things like ED and fatigue and apathy that are sometimes just easier ignored if your focus is on the motor symptoms. So my goal is that patients, I have found that it is way easier to instigate change in this community, getting through to the patients than the docs. Right? Like I've now been a Parkinson's researcher for 10 years, diet, exercise, lifestyle stuff, intranasal glutathione. I do radiology research. It doesn't matter what I'm working on. I think patients are more progressive and receptive than the providers. If you want real change, it's going to be an uprising from within. It's like Alcoholics Anonymous and Parkinson's disease are these two beautiful examples where the patients got it together and are going to figure it out before the researchers and the providers by coming together and sharing what they know.
Yeah. So are you actively, trying to meet with the healthcare providers to explain to them what's going on and why it's valuable?
Yeah. So we have a couple projects in the works. We already have providers at major medical centers, and it's being used in a bunch of different clinical trials. It's being used in high school kids experiments. It's being used in at NIH sponsored device studies. And so we are starting to get researchers using it all over the place. I'm hoping for more and more of that. Like I said, more languages, but more than anything, I am looking forward to providers starting to appreciate that they too can benefit. I think that's where I'm furthest behind, is providers have not come to appreciate the value of this yet.
Well, I think it'd be also fun if everybody in the family had it downloaded and you compared your scores every so often and looked at each other's scores and, hey, you're really good in that. Or
Speaking of that, here's really what my goal is. Competition between providers. I want to see which providers get the best outcomes. I think that if every patient registered and said, here's my score, here's how I'm doing over time, and here's the clinic that I go to or the provider I see, we're not currently collecting that information. But if we could have providers start to be able to say, hey, wow, the average rate of progression is 38 points per year, but in our clinic, it's only been 10 points per year. Right? Let's learn from those people. If there is a clinic out there that is getting better results than the others, let's find them and see what they're doing differently. Let's not just make this all about you, but let's study us too. We could probably do better than we are. And right now, the microscope has not been on the care that we provide or how well you're doing or whether our actions translate to you actually feeling better.
there's a couple people that are trying to use the app right now, and they're saying that they're updating their numbers and it's not updating scores or something. They have issues, technical issues with the app.
Yep.
Who can they reach out to?
I'll put it in the chat group. dr.allen, ALLEN at pd-symptoms.com.
Okay, so that'll be in the chat. What if, so this is actually interesting. Sometimes you forget what you scored things the last time, but you may feel better than you did last time, but you don't know what, if you, did I put it at a 30 or a 40? And what if I put it lower than I did last time? Or like, should you worry about that?
No, don't worry about it. It doesn't really matter. You just want to, as accurately as possible, say this past week, how much of a problem has it been? Because there are a couple things. One, it may be that your constipation is getting better. The other thing that may be happening is you're just feeling better. And if you miss 1 or 2 bowel movements a week, you're not so bothered by it, right? You recover faster. It's less debilitating. I don't care if what gets better is your constipation or your perception of your constipation. As long as your score is moving towards a 0, I'm happy. And there are going to be things that happen. Here's a mistake a lot of people make is they fall down the stairs, they get in a car accident, and they don't take their score for a couple of weeks because they don't want to ruin their scores. They don't want a high score on there. They don't want to look bad. And I would argue it is so important to know where the curbs are. Like that, you want to take your score then and say, I'm in pain, everything hurts, I'm not sleeping well. And in the notes section, I just fell down the stairs, I just had hip replacement surgery. Make a note of it so that 5 years from now, when you're complaining about missing a couple of days of bowel movements, you can look back and say, you know what, as bad as this week is, it is still nowhere near as bad as I was that week after I fell down the stairs. And that is the kind of perspective that ends up being valuable.
That's great. There's an app called the Strive PD app, and somebody's asking, is that related to your app at all?
No, but I hope that at some point we can find a way to work together. They are better they do tremor sensors, they measure mobility, they're a wearables device, and they do have some functions that allow for medication management.
Okay, great. What do you think can help people who are on this call right now, who download the app today? How do you get in the habit of doing it?
Set a reminder, allow notifications, and set a reminder for monthly. I don't think you need to do it very often. And if you only do it today and before each of your doctor visits, you're golden. That would be enough for you to get 92% of the benefit.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we do only see the doc for 15 or 30 minutes a year, practically. So for them to have even a little bit more of a snapshot of how you're feeling and what's bothering you the most, so valuable to the MDS. It's great.
And it's really fabulous to see what happens to patients when they start seeing their score coming down. There is something that it really infuses the person to keep going when they can see the results of their labors. They exercise, they take a little extra medication, they sleep better, they take their supplements, they eat their Brussels sprouts, and they start to see their numbers come down. And that really does propel those positive behaviors further forward.
The question is the app optimized for a phone or a tablet?
Both, just not computer.
Not computer. Okay. Can you go back and enter original system from before you were diagnosed?
Nope. And that's why it's so important to do it today. And you can also not go back and delete scores that you didn't like from the past. So we've had a couple people emailing and, hey, I let my kid take his score on my app. Will you delete that one from last March 13th? For a whole bunch of reasons, we just can't do that. So tell your kid to download his own version.
And if you're using both the phone and the app and the iPad, because you have an account, they'll sync up.
Yep.
Okay. Melissa's asking, is this taking the place of Laura's hour-long surveys?
So no, the hour-long surveys that the question is about. So the way that I can tell you how to slow and reduce that pro-PD score is because for the last 10 years, I have been doing a study called the MVP study, mvp-study.com, where twice a year I send a 1-hour survey to 3,000 people with Parkinson's around the world. And you tell me what you eat, what time you go to bed, whether you're single or married, what meds you take, what supplements you take, and then you all submit those data, and I write code that tells me what are those behaviors that are most significantly steering progression. Who are the people that are doing the best, and what are they doing differently? So it is true that in that study, I use the pro-PD as an outcome measure, but this is the outcome measure without the full study. But I need you all to participate in the study so that once you get your score, I can tell you how to reduce it.
Yeah, you're here to help. We can't have too many tools in the toolbox, right? Can you give us an update on your Parkinson's sniffing dog?
Yes. I have been asleep at the wheel and not making development of that a priority. For those who don't know, I have been screaming for 10 to 20 years now that Parkinson's disease isn't really a neurologic disorder. It is a metabolic disease with downstream neurological consequences. And so there are dogs that smell epilepsy and blood sugar crashes and panic attacks. And so I was very well aware that dogs were able to use their nose to access the metabolism of humans. And so when I learned that Joy Milne, there's a woman who could smell Parkinson, I screamed, of course there is, because this is metabolic. And that morning I went to work trying to find the dream dog, because if a woman can smell it, any dog can smell it, because, even Joy being a super sniffer doesn't compare to dogs, which can smell 1 drop of urine in 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools, right? Proportionally. And so I went out, it took about 1.5 years to find Italian truffle hunting dogs, which have been bred for the last 900 years to identify ripe truffles underground and communicate with their handlers. So I got my hands on 2 Lagotto Romagnolo dogs, and it took about 4 days to train each of them to identify the scent of Parkinson's disease via earwax. And so the name of it is called the Park 9, PARK-9. It's not publicly available yet, but we have really, really good sense. It's easy, it's fast, it's accurate. I just haven't figured out how to scale it. Right now, we have people sending dirty Q-tips to every office I have from all over the world. Hey, this is Bob, let me know what the dogs say. And I just need a little more brain space and money and time to kind of figure out how to make a facility that really is open for business so that you can have your children and your husbands and wives and loved ones send in earwax samples today, and the dogs can tell you right now whether or not they already have the scent of Parkinson's. The SIN one, I'm super excited about the biopsies and things like that, but they're a lot more expensive and more invasive. And, you know, in my dream world, everyone would do smell tests around the age of 40, turn in a dirty Q-tip, you know, if they don't do well on the smell test. If the dogs say yes, we go for a biopsy. And pretty soon we are identifying those of you with Parkinson's disease years before the motor symptoms come on.
And what's interesting about the dogs and Joy, who can smell, is that they're smelling it before the symptoms come on. And so you actually begin to be able to proactively take on your Parkinson's before it rears its ugly head. And hopefully we can stop it in its tracks at some point too. Once we
Bluntly, I think we already have the tools we need to diagnose Parkinson's early and slow progression, and we are not using them.
Yes, which is very unfortunate. Why do you think that is?
Because there's no organized president, captain of the ship who's coming up with an agenda. I mean, COVID, you know, like the response or don't like the response, we did an amazing job coordinating efforts and coming together for a common goal. If we took that same level of coordinated effort in Parkinson's disease and said, game on, what do we have? What do we have to work with? And again, everyone's looking for this molecular basis, right? The example I like to give is, okay, so why is that? Is because we have a deep, deep, deep bias that we are right, that where we've been looking is getting us close, and that the more invasive and expensive and advanced the technology, the more real sciencey it is. And I think that, you know, what I like to remind people is after 3 million people died of scurvy, we used limes to cure scurvy for 200 years, for as long as we've known Parkinson's. For 200 years, we effectively cured scurvy with limes. And then we discovered vitamin C. And the current paradigm that we are living in right now is that I can only get a grant for vitamin C, right? Like, you all want somebody else to come up with a molecule that will solve the problem, and I think what we are realizing is, oh, some of these problems we probably helped create, and some of the solutions we have to be a part of. And even if we die not understanding the mechanism by which they work, they still work, and they're available for us to use. And even though it may be less scientifically sexy to not know the molecular mechanism by which limes work, I'm telling you, if your choice is scurvy with limes or scurvy without limes, just eat the limes.
Right.
In Parkinson's disease, even if you don't understand why exercise works, I don't care. Just do it anyway, because the people who exercise do better.
Yeah. I know Joy smells the extra sebum that we produce. Do we also produce excess earwax? Because I know I do.
No, that's not my experience at all. When people are in clinic offering me earwax samples, I am probably more likely to hear, oh, I don't know if I can get any, than oh, I've got lots here. So no, I don't think that is so much a thing. It's interesting, in clinic, my dogs will go to people's ankles. I use earwax as a portable biospecimen that can be shipped. But it is neat to see my dogs go to people's feet and ankles.
That's cool. Somebody would like you to, Judy would like you to repeat the statement: Parkinson's is not a neurological disease, it is
a metabolic syndrome with downstream neurological consequences.
Okay, and I know you're headed to London, but we'd like to kind of know where you're going to be in the next couple of months, where people can check you out.
I am staying a little close to home because in the summer, all of my efforts really do go into the best thing I do every year is this 1 week kind of VIP all-inclusive camp. People come the first week in August. We have about 50 people from all over the country and world come. And so the next big presentation I will give will be 1 week long in Pacific Northwest. It's called Bastyr Summer School. And then after that, at the end of August, I will be headed to Copenhagen for the annual Parkinson's Movement Disorders Congress.
That's great. So you're gonna get the movement disorder specialists to pick up this app and use it.
Yep, I will be presenting a poster at the conference on the feasibility of using an app for remote patient monitoring in Parkinson's disease.
Oh, okay, here's the last question. This is a good one. Do you know what the correlation between toenail fungus and PD is?
No, but I am positive that it should, to my knowledge, I've not seen a study look at that. I've been saying this for years. I would be willing to guess that over 95%, 95% of my patients with Parkinson's have toenail fungus. I don't know, since I don't see patients who don't have Parkinson's, I don't actually know, maybe all people over the age of 50 have toenail fungus. I don't know what normal is because that's just not my clinical practice. But as a PD doc, I would say it is a rare person who tells me they don't have any, or doing a physical exam and they don't have any. So there are some questions about mold toxins, mycotoxins getting into the bloodstream. One of the studies I would love to do, I just haven't had time to, but we have a paper under review right now on the intestinal microbiome as it pertains to Parkinson's disease. It would be very easy to send in some toenail clippings of patients and household partners or something like that, and look at the microbiome of nails and see what organisms, fungal or otherwise, are actually growing there. So
Right.
It's a study I would love to do and needs to be done.
Cool. Well, count me in. I'll help you. I got some fungus you can have. All right. You deal with a lot of fungus. You got mushrooms, truffle dogs. You got.
Yeah, no, the nose is a theme too, right? My NIH and Michael J. Fox funded research is all on intranasal glutathione, and then I have the dogs that smell Parkinson's, and a lot of my work is looking into olfactory exposures, good and bad, and the loss of smell happens really early in Parkinson's disease, and I think that the loss of smell is really impacting nutrition more than people realize.
Oh, yeah, because it's harder to taste things too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I want to thank you for your time today and for creating this amazing app. Why don't you give people just your websites and where to get the app, and then we'll wrap it up.
Right. So pd-symptoms.com is the information where you can learn more about the app. Parkinson-school.com is where I teach a monthly class. LaurieMischley.com is the research that I'm doing. And then BastyrPDSchool.com is for those who might be interested in coming to the Bastyr week-long camp one of these years.
Great. Thank you, Laurie. And thank you for attending this great webinar. And we would encourage you to go to pdavengers.com and become a PD Avenger if you haven't done so far. There's also lots of new features on the website. You can get the very latest news headlines on Parkinson's. There's a shop now where you can get PD Avengers gear and all sorts of cool stuff. So head up to pdavengers.com, and thank you for being great advocates in the Parkinson's community. We look forward to ending Parkinson's together. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity.
Save your chat. We did put a lot of information in your chat. If you click on the bottom, there's 3 little dots in your chat. You can save your chat that way because we did put several links in there. And thank you both for coming today. We really appreciate your time. Wait.